Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, which will talk you through two very important issues. First is how to deal with difficult parents, and second of all, how to make sure you're not experiencing abuse in that relationship with them. So without further ado, I'm going to share with you a screen with my presentations. You are watching right now. You are probably watching right now my personal / business account on Facebook, but at the same time, please don't hesitate, but join Sunnah Wellness and Healing Community. You will find more freebies over there, as well as instructions how to opt out your learning with my other online courses. I will attach link to it, obviously. So don't worry, it's time for you to ask me questions right now. It's time for you to send me hearts, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever it feels like it. I believe some of you were already waiting for this webinar. For some of you, it's a quite new subject. So I would start with brief, maybe introduction. And Birr Wlidayn can be translated from Arabic into kindness for your parents. That is one of the religious requirements in Muslim community, but not only in Muslim community, in any well-respected community or civilization. History will prove that respect to elders is one of the moral, not only religious characters. However, the longer I work with clients from Asian and Muslim community, what I've noticed is they are suffering abuse from their parents or suffering neglect from their parents, or they believe they do. So this webinar, I hope, will put things straight. I hope it will clarify your emotions, your experiences. If you're one of those individuals who actually suffering or finding it difficult to connect with your parents. So how to achieve ihsan, which in Arabic means kindness, and maybe perfection, moral perfection, with difficult or abusive parents, and how to recognize mental health and spiritual health consequences of guilt-driven parenthood, and how to make sure that this is not something you're taking for to another generations, meaning you're not inflicting your children with similar behavior. I think that's important. I might not answer your questions at the moment, but after my presentation, which will take probably 15 minutes, I will look back and see if you want to interact with me, which you are most welcome. So what is abuse? You can find many informations, many definitions, but I think the easy one which I found gives a justice to it. So it is improper use of treatment of a person, often to unfairly on improperly for the purpose of unfair and improper gain of benefits. So yes, indeed, we speak here about conscious, sometimes subconscious, but more likely conscious control inflicted on you for the purpose of another person gaining benefits. In Arabic, oppression is described as dhulm, and I will show in this presentation also what really Quran and Sunnah speaks about dhulm. So please stay with me, bear with me. So how to recognize this abuse in your life is simply sit down with yourself and try to answer those questions, whether you've ever felt physically hurt by, I don't know, maybe hitting, by slapping, pinching, pushing, Have you ever experienced someone trying to impose some medication, some health treatment on you which you didn't agree with? Maybe you felt in a very particular way. Maybe you felt shame and guilt. Maybe you felt you're not good enough. Maybe you felt that you are lonely in your own family. Maybe you felt that you are scapegoated as well. What I mean by scapegoated is that you've tried so hard, but somehow everyone is against you. Everyone is using you for the purpose of their blaming game. Maybe you felt controlled financially, not only emotionally. Maybe you felt that you had no other choice but committed fraud, any type of fraud. Maybe you've been encouraged or forced to steal, and further on you were criminalized on that level. And for some of you, perhaps you've experienced something of a sexual matter, meaning you've been exposed to inappropriate content. Maybe you watched porns, or maybe you had witnessed sexual acts in young age, or maybe older age. Maybe you've been coerced to touch, or you've been touched. Maybe you've been even raped. And for some reason, all those emotions you're keeping down in the basement until today. For some reason, you don't want to, or you're scared maybe to face them. The reality of what has happened to you is still a secret to you, because you feel that no one else is going to actually listen to you, believe you, or protect you, or seek justice for you. If you said yes to any of these, perhaps it's time for you to consider and make further research, maybe engage in therapy, and explore whether it is a fact that you experience physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, discriminational abuse, emotional/psychological abuse, and now in faith community, it's also spiritual/religious abuse. Which is not mentioned on my slides. How you can recognize it is when maybe you are this person who's been told by your own family, by your community, you will go to hell if you don't do this. If you don't dress like this, if you don't behave certain ways, God will punish you. God will disown you. That sort of ideas about God, who is always punishing. He's not loving, but he's punishing, and he's having his eye on you. But abuse can also be neglect, including self-neglect, domestic abuse, as well as modern slavery. I want to show you now what is neglect. It is a branch of abuse. But many of you might feel confused. Where is it that my parents might neglected me? Or where is it that I neglect my own children? And where is it that I'm abusing them? So the line is not maybe quite straight, but as you can imagine, neglect is a bit less intense than already mentioned types of abuses. If you feel that your needs had been ignored, and they can be any type of needs, emotional, spiritual, physical, but also medical needs, they had been ignored, meaning you've been silent, you've been going through life unnoticed, invisible, almost you felt that nobody cares here for me. It's like, I don't matter, I'm not significant. And you felt that you can't confide in any problems. With any problems, you can't confide with adults. Perhaps this is something that you've been subjected to. Perhaps you've been victim of neglect in your childhood. And then how to recognize it right now for yourself as an adult is when you actually turning this idea of I'm not important, nobody even will believe me, what's the point? You're turning this belief from your childhood into adulthood, and you start neglecting yourself. So this is that point when everyone else in your life matters more, they're more important than you, even when you feel tired, even when you feel exhausted, even when you feel ill, it's still not as bad as others. So I would feel guilty actually to sit down and rest. I will feel it's a huge injustice to others for me to actually invest in my health, maybe see doctor, maybe see professional, maybe seek therapy, right? It's such a waste of money on me. I'm not significant here. So if you find yourself isolating yourself from your environment, if you find yourself that you're not even looking after your nutrition, maybe on a exercise level or maybe on nutritional level, you don't even give your body that hug, that right. If you don't look after your clothing as well, and I don't mean in a sense that you're stingy to yourself, because everyone's economic situation is different. But if you're not looking after the cleanliness, the hygiene of your own appearance, this is also a sign of neglect. So sit down with yourself, and maybe after this webinar, maybe when you're listening to me, try to ask me questions. Try to, if that's not too personal, try to figure out what is it that you've experienced from your childhood, and what is it that it's still dragging in, and perhaps it's actually impacting how you treat your children at the moment. Because if you're not aware of your rights being override, your rights being taken away from you in childhood, you subconsciously taking it into a belief system. You are convinced that that's the way it goes. This is your normal. Therefore, you are perpetrating this pathological the circle into, and you introducing it to further generations, and it can even affect your children. Now, the reason why it is so important to actually answer those questions: how was my childhood? Was I neglected? Was I abused? Or is it something else? And I will speak about this something else in a moment. The reason why it's so important is because we actually here one of the spiritual reasons for us to be here is to leave legacy behind. What is better legacy than the shape of our family, than the mental, spiritual, and physical fitness of our progeny and their progeny? So this is how important it is for you to actually sit down with yourself and be honest. Where is it all coming from? And what do I mean by what? So if you had been abused, you probably are affected in some, if not in every level of your mental, spiritual, physical, even financial being, and social being as well. So the reason why it's so important to say no to abuse in your life, it's because you have numerous of reasons and numerous of supports, actually, depending from the country you're living in. So in Britain, there are great civil laws, criminal laws as well, put in place to protect individuals from harm, be it domestic abuse, being a child abuse, and so forth and so forth. And if you don't obey those laws, you get yourself into a trouble, right? So if you are on the other side, if you are a victim, it's important for you to actually go out there, educate yourself, and know what are your rights from that perspective. Now, your another rights are rights to healthy life, including your mental health, right? And if you are not careful enough and you're not taking active responsibility of questioning, why do I feel this way? Is that normal to live that life in that dysfunctional, toxic relationship with whomever, not only your parents? What will happen to you psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually is that you will develop further pathologies, right? And you will reenact on them. So let me just mention a few of them. Sleeping issues, stress, anxieties, depressions, antisocial behaviors, or social anxieties, eating disorders, you will find difficult to build strong relationships. You will have relationship pathologies, such as like, I don't know, you might not know how to resolve conflicts, and struggle with anger management in your relationships. PTSD, because any abuse can create a traumatic experience, especially for those of you who are very sensitive and very vulnerable out there. Now, the most probably troublesome aspect, I promise you I will come back to it, so this is that moment, of living in abusive or neglective relationship with your parents, is that you believe in that paradigm, you're starting believing that paradigm, that they never want good for you, and you start thinking of yourself as a victim. Therefore, obviously, you will in the future spot injustices like this, and you will always feel like a victim. So you will react to whatever comes your way, not only from your parents and not only from your beloved ones, but also in your social circles, in your professional circles. You will always experience, you risking that you will experience majority of the times, if not always, that something or someone is after you, and you will use you might use your dysfunctional relationship with parents as an excuse. Oh, it is because of my parent, my dad or my mom, that's the reason why I am the way I am. I can't be any other way because they harmed me for life. So these are the mental health risks. And we need to be aware that if we don't put foot down the moment when injustice happens to us, this is where our psychology, when our subconscious and spirituality can take us on the road of pathology. And from the religious perspective, from the religious values, whatever faith you may embrace, across the board, they will talk about justice and about necessity to preserve and respect your own life. It is no coincidence that you exist. It is no coincidence that God, that Creator, called you to life. You have a purpose here, but you also have rights to dignified life. Now, if that is not coming easy to you, please understand that you also have rights to provide it for yourself. So from spiritual or religious point of view, you are called to something called accountability and agency within yourself, meaning gave birth to courage, to moral courage within yourself. The reason why it's important, especially in monotheistic religions, is because we all believe, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, that we are going to be taken into accountability. Everyone here is going to be taken into accountability for whatever and however we shown up in our relationship in this world, in this time that has been given to us. Therefore, rest assured that your parents, if they're abusive, or anyone who's abusive towards you, they will be called to that responsibility, right? They will be reminded. And from Islamic perspective, those rights which haven't been provided to you, those hukuk in Arabic, those rights which you haven't received, they will be waiting for you on the day of Akhirah. So if you feel that you're losing out here, or maybe you're even losing it at the moment in this life, just remind yourself that perhaps it is just a fraction of my experience, this life here, dunya, because I'm actually independent and everlasting soul, which lived before dunya, lives in dunya, and will live afterwards. So this is just one of the stations. This is just an experience that hopefully, we say inshallah, should help me to actually achieve successful eternal life later on. And no doubt God Almighty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will take everyone to responsibility. So the reason why I warned everyone from victimization is because if you position yourself as a victim in relationships, you might have tendency to blame others for your life, for your unsuccessful life, yeah? And you might use this excuse for treating others the way you've been treated by your abusers. Now we're talking about parents. And you'll be taken for responsibility, to responsibility. You'll be accounted for that as well. And there'll be no excuses for you there. Because you'll be responsible for your own actions. So that's why it's so important to sit down with yourself and go through those steps of self-realization. I'm going to show you those steps in a minute. So from moral perspective values, the reason why it's so important to stop any abuse in your life, even if it's personal or to somebody else, is because it's quite universal that equality, courage, justice, personal freedom, and responsibilities across the board, whether you believe or you're not believer, these are the very basic humanistic values which general population holds on to. So don't forget that these are actually your rights as well. Now, how to stop it is another case, and I suggest 4 steps. First is awareness and education. So you've done this step right now, just by showing up, just by taking interest. Something in you made you realize, oh, this is interesting. I don't know if it fits my experience or not, but I really want to explore what is it parental abuse, what is it Birr Wlidayn versus being neglected. I really want to understand that. So you've done that bit already for yourself. You educated yourself. Now, the next steps is to actually understand what has been said here on that very short webinar, meaning I have responsibility to put a stop to it. And I have responsibility to raise in myself courage. I cannot stay behind. I cannot keep my head in the sand like an ostrich. I actually have to show up. This is what's expected from me. This is a very difficult part for majority of us. I really appreciate that. But once we do it, a next step, which maybe for some of you sounds like mission impossible, next step is just consequence. It just comes too easy, and that is forgiveness and rahmah to your abusers. The moment you learn how to put your foot down, how to draw the boundaries, how to respect yourself, marks a very important milestone in your psychology. That is that this marks the moment when you start respecting yourself and you stop expecting others to respect you first. This is when you show up in a relationship. This is that moment when you're actually showing others, teaching others that you are actually a valuable person. But can you see how it's impossible for others to learn that, for some, especially those abusers in your life, to learn that unless you show up for yourself? Yeah, so that's why this journey starts with education, checking yourself, taking accountability. And then once you feel good inside of yourself, once you know who you are, once you know your rights, once you understand that even though you're not getting them here, you will get them over there, inshallah, on the day of judgment, then you just see those people for the pathologies that they're going through. You see them for the journey that they haven't embarked on. You've been on that journey. You've done the hardest bit. You took yourself into accountability. You looked at your dark spots. You worked with your vulnerabilities. They don't have the courage. They don't understand accountability. So naturally in your heart, what grows is feeling sorry for them. And psychologically, what happens to you in your subconscious, you're detaching yourself from them. So they no longer have rights to, you no longer give them rights to hurt you. You're no longer dependent on their approval. You're no longer, in a very strange way, addicted to their dismissal, because you no longer see yourself as a victim. And the last point in this manual, How to Stop Abuse, meaning persistency and consequence, I cannot stress how important it is, because surely the journey of healing, the journey of recovery is a very long one. So you will experience relapses. Every now and again, your abusers or people who remind you about abusers, they will drag you back to that position of being victimized, being weak, being insignificant, being of no value. And that in that very moment, you almost have to take yourself back and remind yourself about your education, about your psychoeducation, about how powerful it is to have that agency in you, and how different you are from your abusers, meaning you matured, they didn't. Now, the tools which can help you spiritually are quite a few. So I will present you few paradigm bending perspectives. So first of all, Quran starts with default rules. All right. So the rule number one is you should show respect and you should practice kindness for your parents. And we find out about it in Quran and in Sunnah. So let me quote for you Quran Surah Al-Isra. And your Lord had decreed that you not worship anything except Him. And to parents you give excellent treatment. Now in Quran, when we find the two different concepts being joined, merged together, it's for us to understand how important they are. So the most important thing to God, to our Creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that we worship only Him and alone. And then what else is important to Him, how He's testing you, is that you are also good to your parents. So that is the degree of importance of Birr Wlidayn, kindness to your parents, as close as Tawheed. Whether one of both of them reach old age while you're still with them, say no to them, say not to them even oof. And do not repel them, but speak to them in noble words, speak to them with kindness. And lower to them the wings of humility out of mercy, and say, my Lord, have mercy upon them, and they brought me up when I was small. So always remember, especially when you become parents, I think then it really hits you how difficult it is to be parent. The servitude, if in parenthood, it's never-ending story. You're in constant stress, you're in constant worry, which is mixed with unconditional love. There's nothing like being a parent. And then you realize, oh my God, this is what my parents had to go through. And then you should contemplate, oh, and this is their ways of looking after me. And if you don't feel you've been looked after, if you don't feel that your rights, that your best interests were at stake, this is that moment when this rule is just default, and you move in to deeper research in our eschatology. And you might come across a verse, Sunnah, reported by Dhar al-Ghifari, which says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I have forbidden oppression for myself, and I have made it forbidden amongst you, so do not oppress one another. O my servant, all of you are astray except those who I have guided, and seek guidance from me, and I shall guide you. SubhanAllah, this is the instructions in itself. If you've noticed, God Almighty, He says, oppression is wrong. Whenever you find oppression is wrong, you have to make sure that you don't commit that oppression. So if you find yourself being oppressive, always ask yourself the question, where is it coming from? If it's coming from your childhood, because that is the belief system that was created for you, you have a job to do. We've discussed what kind of job you have to do. Before you forgive them, before you stop seeing yourself as a victim, you have to properly educate yourself about your own processes. And it's not one-man job. it's not one-man job. Sometimes you have to reach out for nasiha, perhaps psychotherapy, perhaps circles of therapy, of support. And then in this hadith you find another instructions. Every one of you is astray, meaning your parents are astray, even you have potential to be astray. And we sort of proved already how can it be that we're going into pathology rather than self-responsibility, except from those who are guided. So ask me for guidance, right? Ask me for guidance. That is the power of your dua. This is the power of your prayers, and it's not a case of miracle moments happening in your life and you know everything right now. You know how you're supposed to act. You know how you're supposed to feel. It's actually a process, and sometimes because of this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will invite people, give you some ayats, give you some signs that will help you to conceptualize everything that you're going through and make this test more clear to you. Now, and I can speak a lot about it, but I know that you have busy lives, and it's just a moment before it, which brings me to a sincere dua for you and all your family, for your ibadah and your prayers to be accepted. I mean, now, another tools, which are sunnah tools, for you to help you relive that experience of childhood abuse from different perspectives. And numerous hadiths, really, so many of them. I'm just presenting you a few of them. But this time around, I want you to think about your rights as a child. So yes, Birr Wlidayn is so important. If it's done right, they deserve respect, and they have guidance. Your parents, they have guidance how to end this Birr Wlidayn. Every child, accordingly to God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has its rights, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has called them righteous because they honored their fathers and children. Just as your father has rights over you, so to you, your child has right over you. And then we learn that fear Allah and treat your children fairly. And then we have another beautiful hadith saying to Al-Numan, would you like for your children to honor you equally? And he said yes. So you have to honor them equally before you receive fair treatment from them. So give them fairly. This is that beautiful story in a hadith which you can find in Muslim, when a man wanted to unfairly gift his children, and Prophet ﷺ, he sort of awakened in him emotional intelligence and asked, well, how about your relationships with other children? Would you like for them to treat you just like you treat them? Would you feel okay? How would it feel for you if they favor you, if some of them favor you or favor someone else over you? Because that's exactly what you're doing favoritism. And then we have those beautiful examples of how Prophet ﷺ used to love children. We might remember a little girl who held his finger in Medina, and she was holding him for this finger. Anyone kind of had access to the Prophet, even small children, and she was holding his finger, and she just wanted to walk, maybe talk, maybe play with him, and he allowed her as long as she needed him, as long as she needed that quality time. He was there for her, and nobody could stop her. And then we have another hadith saying that children have 3 rights from their father only. This hadith was presented to us on many occasions, and one of those occasions was when somebody came complaining to Umar. It was a father, a distressed father, saying that his children, his son particularly, he doesn't respect him. Well, we observe that in our community right now as well, don't we? And Umar, he listened to him and he said, well, I can't make judgment until I hear your son. Can I speak to your son? And he asked here this particular man, particular Sahabi, son's few questions. He said, all right, I heard from your father. Now I want to make sure that I hear from you. Do you mind if I find out first whether your father selected a good mother for you? No, he didn't. That was the answer. Okay, I want to find out whether your father gave you a good, honorable name. No, he didn't. Okay, and I want to find out whether your father raised you upon Sunnah, raised you upon Quran, whether he put much effort to raise you in the moral, in your moral character as well. No, he didn't. What Umar did, he turned out to this Sahabi and said, you failed your son before he failed you. So there you go. In our Sunnah, there is plenty proofs supporting the fact that Birr Wlidayn doesn't come for free. It is our duty, but it's a default rule. So we give as much as we can to our parents, minding that our safety, including emotional, not only physical, but also emotional and financial safety, comes first, because that's the duty first. That's part of our worship and being grateful for whatever blessings we received from our Creator. And then you walk your way through. The less you feel as a victim, the less you feel harmed by your parents. You can implement those suggestions easier. Listen to their advice if it's obviously not taking you astray from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take them out to different places, cook for them, maybe assist them financially if that's the need. Don't interrupt them when they speak. Have enough patience to listen to them. Don't look at them with angry face. Make dua for them, and so forth. You can walk your way through it, but first you need to walk your way out of side effects of abuse. So I hope it makes sense to you. I want to see actually if you have any questions to me. So just bear with me a second. Do you have any questions to me? No, you don't. Brilliant. So I'm making assumption that this is so self-explanatory. I believe that it is also so needed to discuss among us in communities. And I will finish now. But if you feel like you want to ask me questions when you are rewatching this webinar, please don't hesitate. I'm here to help.